For years, the world tuned in to witness the Owens live their seemingly perfect life on their remote Yorkshire farm. But when the show abruptly disappeared and the family went silent, curiosity turned to concern. After 3 long years of mystery, Raven Owens is ready to reveal the truth behind her mother's divorce from Clive Owen. What really happened behind the stone walls and windswept hills of Ravensseat? How did Amanda and Clive's once unshakable bond crumble? The silence over the valley speaks volumes. The sudden cancellation of our Yorkshire farm by Channel 5 sent shockwaves through its loyal viewers. Fans who had followed the Owen family's everyday adventures were left not just confused but longing for answers. Answers that never came. There was no grand finale. No heartwarming farewell to the audience who had grown so attached to the Owens journey. Just a sudden end with only vague hints about future Owen family project. No explanations. No transparency. Just a shocking disappearance with no closure. The cancellation wasn't just the end of a beloved show. It signaled the quiet vanishing of a family that had been a window into an authentic rural life. For years, the Owens had been the picture of happiness, living in harmony with nature on their sprawling North Yorkshire farm, surrounded by animals and children. The show wasn't just entertainment, it was a window to a simpler, idyllic life. When it ended without warning, it felt like a loss. Not just for fans but for a family that had let the world into their most private moments. But behind the scenes, a far more complicated story was unfolding. What viewers hadn't seen were the emotional and personal struggles quietly simmering beneath the surface. Once the golden couple of rural Britain, Amanda and Clive had kept their separation under wraps, sparking whispers of discord that contrasted sharply with the public image of happiness. As the cameras stopped rolling, the cracks in their relationship began to widen, and the farm that had once echoed with the sound of children's laughter now stood in silence, a somber reflection of the complexities that had never been shown on screen. This wasn't just about a cancelled TV show. It was the unraveling of a family's carefully curated life. The public was left to question what really happened behind the scenes at Ravensseat, the Owens' seemingly perfect world. Viewers of our Yorkshire farm, Amanda and Clive weren't just TV stars. They were an embodiment of perseverance, authenticity, and the spirit of British countryside living. For years, they had shared their lives with millions, raising 9 children in the remote and unforgiving hills of Yorkshire, becoming symbols of resilience and connection with the land. Owens were presented to the world as the perfect rural couple, hard-working, down-to-earth, and devoted to their children, their farm, and each other. Their daily life was anything but easy. From shepherding duties to managing a large flock of sheep, battling the harsh Yorkshire winters, to juggling the logistics of a busy family life, the Owens embodied the true resilience of country living. Amanda, with her tall, commanding presence, quickly became the face of our Yorkshire farm. With her sharp wit, infectious energy, and warmth, she captivated viewers, offering a glimpse into a life that many could only dream of. Clive, in contrast, was quieter, less the showman and more the stoic, silent partner. While Amanda's charisma drew viewers in, Clive's reserved nature balanced their dynamic, providing a steady, grounding force. He was the backbone, content to let Amanda take center stage while he shouldered the grueling, unseen tasks of farm life. Yet, this dynamic, this delicate balance, began to crack over time. The pressures of maintaining their public image, combined with the unyielding demands of both family and farm life, began to take their toll. What had once seemed like a raw, authentic portrayal of rural living now captured the strain of existing under constant scrutiny. While their children were largely shielded from the spotlight, they too became part of a narrative that was beginning to unravel, an illusion of bliss, cracked under the intense glare of national attention. But it wasn't just the cameras that weighed on the family. Behind the scenes, Amanda and Clive were facing a growing emotional distance. The pressures that had once made them so relatable were now quietly eroding their marriage. And at the heart of it all was Raven, their eldest daughter, who felt the emotional weight most acutely. As the firstborn, Raven had always found herself in the public eye, whether she wanted it or not. But as the family dynamic shifted, so did her role. She was no longer just the helpful, dependable big sister. She was transitioning into adolescence, stepping into the emotional complexities of a family in crisis. And it was Raven, too, who would soon be the key to understanding the Owens' mysterious silence. Why had her once open family retreated into seclusion? What really happened behind the scenes at Ravensseat Farm? Why did it feel as though the fame they had embraced was now pulling them apart? After 3 years of silence, Raven Owens is finally ready to reveal the truth. Why her mother, Amanda, chose to divorce Clive. Raven Owens, at just 12 years old, was thrust into the spotlight when our Yorkshire farm began filming. But she wasn't just another farm kid, she was part of a family whose every move was being closely followed by millions. While the cameras captured the highs and lows of life on Ravensseat Farm, Raven, the eldest of 9 children, quietly observed from the sidelines. To the public, her family was the epitome of rustic bliss, an idyllic vision of country living. But Raven saw beyond the lens. She saw her mother, Amanda, the confident, radiant shepherdess, struggling to hold it all together behind the scenes. Raven saw her father, Clive, a man whose deep love for his children was undeniable, but whose marriage was slowly crumbling under the weight of years of pressure and fatigue. Growing up under the constant watch of cameras, Raven matured quickly. The eldest, she naturally became the protector, shielding her siblings from the growing strain of public scrutiny. She threw herself into her studies, choosing to pursue veterinary science, a field that mirrored her deep love for animals and the life they shared on the farm. Working late into the night to support herself, Raven became accustomed to sacrifice and quiet endurance. As the rumors and online gossip swirled, she became the silent guardian, ensuring that her younger siblings were shielded from the relentless speculation surrounding her family's fractured relationship. When the headlines hit, Raven stayed silent. The cameras had stopped rolling, and the world seemed to forget about them. Her silence wasn't out of fear. It wasn't about hiding the truth. It was because, for Raven, the truth was still too painful to share. She wasn't ready. The quiet observer, who had watched the cracks form between her parents, wasn't yet prepared to speak her truth. Not yet. Once the cameras stopped, life on Ravenseat Farm couldn't return to normal. It simply couldn't. The familiar farm routines remained. The early mornings, the bitterly cold winters, the endless care of the livestock. But the family, once united under the spotlight, was no longer whole. Amanda, after years of enduring the strain of a televised marriage, made the decision to leave, moving out and leaving Clive behind with the younger children. What initially seemed like a practical, amicable separation was much more than that. It marked the end of an era, an end to the carefully constructed image that had been meticulously crafted over the years. At first, their separation seemed almost businesslike. No cameras, no fanfare. The show had ended, the filming had stopped, and they each retreated into their own lives. But the cracks, the ones that had always been there beneath the surface, were now impossible to ignore. With the lens gone, those cracks became painfully visible. The illusion of unshakable rural harmony began to fade, unraveling before the world's eyes. And the speculation, it started almost immediately. Online chatter exploded. Was it fame that tore them apart? Had the pressures of their newfound celebrity created a rift too wide to bridge? Was there someone else? Exhaustion. The world was desperate for answers, but Amanda and Clive remained tight-lipped, never offering the public the satisfaction of knowing exactly what had gone wrong. For years, Raven remained silent. She watched the divorce unfold from the sidelines, feeling every shift in the family dynamic. It wasn't that she didn't know the truth, it was that she wasn't ready to tell it. Pain was too fresh. The scars of the past, still too raw to reveal. The years between had yet to heal. As time passed, Raven's presence on social media remained carefully curated and calculated. Her posts showcased snippets of her life, work accomplishments, flashes of her health journey, and achievements she could share without exposing too much. Family portraits appeared, but only in fragments, never too close, never too revealing. Meanwhile, Amanda had stepped into the public eye, becoming a sought-after speaker and Instagram influencer, her voice resonating with a new audience. Clive, too, had settled into his new life with Ruben, busy with a spin-off series that kept him on the go. And Raven? She remained mostly in the shadows, letting her family's journey unfold in public while she stayed behind the scenes. Despite her silence, her loyal followers remained, waiting for her to tell her story, waiting for her to break her silence. Some had been there from the early days of our Yorkshire farm, their hearts invested in the Owens highs and lows. And though Raven posted occasionally, a picture of a morning walk, a healthy meal, or a graduation photo, the absence in the spaces between the pictures was unmistakable. The silence spoke volumes. The public began to wonder, what was Raven really thinking? What lay behind the carefully curated posts? What had truly happened to the family she once called home? Despite Raven's meticulous social media presence, which kept the truth at arm's length, the curious glances of those who had once loved her family remained unwavering. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. A story post appeared. A black background, stark and simple, yet bold. White text illuminated the dark screen. It's time to tell everything. There were no tags, no hashtags to give clues. No sensational headline, no clickbait, and certainly no tease about an upcoming tell-all. It wasn't designed to create a scandal, nor was it an attempt to stir up drama. It was simply a statement. A confession, perhaps. But more than that, it was a declaration of catharsis. Raven's voice, long silenced, had found its moment. She wasn't angry. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't starting a war or breaking her life down into dramatic sound bites for the world to feast on. This was her truth, and for the first time in years, it was hers to tell, on her terms. This wasn't the beginning of a public breakdown. It wasn't the start of divisive headlines. It was the beginning of her journey toward healing. The silence that had held her captive for years had lifted, replaced with a single, powerful statement: "It's time to tell everything." Raven Owen was ready to speak, and the world waited. Raven's story had never been about loud confrontations or dramatic scandals that dominated the headlines. Instead, it unfolded as a quiet tragedy, one that was far harder to capture in a headline. There were no affairs, no shocking accusations, no sirens cutting through the calm Yorkshire hills. The unraveling of her parents' relationship was far more subtle. It was the kind of unraveling that couldn't be seen, but was always felt. It didn't play out in public. It lingered in the spaces between conversations, in the empty pauses between shared glances. Amanda had always been the driving force in the family. On screen, she was the iconic shepherdess, the mother, the leader, the face of their shared success. But behind the scenes, Raven described a woman who felt increasingly trapped by the weight of it all. She had become the embodiment of public expectation. Always present, always performing, always giving, Amanda was everywhere. But in the privacy of their home, Raven's mother seemed to lose herself in the process. Pressure of being both a mother and a media figure weighed heavily, and over time, it drained her. Clive, on the other hand, had always been rooted in tradition. He was the quiet one, the one who preferred the solitude of the farm to the glare of the media spotlight. He resisted the fame, not out of bitterness, but to preserve the life he had before the cameras came. He clung to his authentic life, the one before all the public attention. This difference in temperament between him and Amanda created a growing gulf rather than a balancing force. In the quiet of their home, the tension began to build, not through loud arguments, but in the absence of connection. Their relationship, once built on shared goals and mutual passion for the farm, slowly eroded in silence. There were no dramatic confrontations, no explosive outbursts. It was the absence of connection that hurt the most. They stopped talking as much. They stopped looking at each other the way they used to. There was no one defining moment, no singular event, just the slow, unspoken understanding that something had shifted. Raven witnessed it all. She saw her mother become quieter, more distant, lost in thought, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Amanda, once vibrant and full of purpose, seemed to fade into the background of her own life. And Clive, always present, seemed increasingly absorbed by his own quiet discontent. Raven watched this gradual shift with quiet sorrow, unable to intervene, unsure of how to fix what was broken. Amanda finally made the decision to leave. It wasn't born out of anger or bitterness. It wasn't about finding someone else or seeking revenge. It was about survival. Amanda needed air. She needed space to breathe again. For so long, she had given so much of herself to everyone around her that she had forgotten who she was. She wasn't just Amanda the shepherdess or Amanda the mother. She was Amanda, a woman with a life, a mind, a spirit, who deserved to exist beyond the role she had played for so many years. The decision to leave wasn't about rejecting Clive. It was about reclaiming herself. Raven, in her quiet way, understood this more than anyone. She had noticed the subtle shift long before it became public. She had seen the exhaustion in her mother's eyes, the silent desperation for a chance to rediscover herself. But just because she understood, didn't mean it was easy. The fractures between her parents weren't something that could be fixed overnight, and Raven knew she couldn't do it. All she could do was watch, bear witness, and try to understand. In the end, Raven saw her mother not as the TV personality or the figurehead of their family's success, but as a woman who had simply been trying to survive. A woman who, in the quietest of ways, had given everything she could until there was nothing left to give. After the divorce, Amanda didn't collapse in the dramatic way many had expected. There was no public meltdown or breakdown for the cameras. Instead, she quietly picked herself up and began to rebuild. She moved to a new place, found a new sense of independence, and began reconnecting with the world outside of the farm. She turned to writing and speaking, expressing herself in ways that went beyond the role she had once been defined by. Critics were quick to label her. They accused her of chasing fame, of seeking attention, of abandoning the life she had once seemed so dedicated to. To them, Amanda's reinvention looked inauthentic, like a desperate grab for relevance. They didn't see what Raven saw. They didn't see a woman who had spent years sacrificing her identity for the sake of her family and the image they had built together. Raven, however, understood. She didn't always agree with her mother's choices, but she recognized the journey Amanda was on. For the first time, she wasn't seeing Amanda as the perfect mother or the superwoman from TV. She was seeing Amanda as a person, someone who had been lost in the roles others had cast her in. Raven could now view her mother's struggles through a different lens, one of empathy and compassion. Amanda wasn't rebuilding for fame or recognition. She was rebuilding for herself. She was searching for joy, peace, and a sense of wholeness that had long eluded her. Raven knew this, even if the world didn't. She had watched her mother quietly navigate the difficult, often lonely, journey of self-discovery. And as Amanda did, Raven couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. It wasn't always pretty, it wasn't always easy, but it was real, but it was necessary, for Amanda and for the woman Raven was growing into. Through it all, Raven knew that the woman behind the camera, her mother, was not just a character to be defined by others. She was a woman in her own right, navigating the same messy, beautiful, and painful journey of life that anyone else did. And for the first time in a long time, Amanda was beginning to find her way back to herself. Clive Owen was never a man of many words. He didn't stand before cameras, spilling his heart in interviews or showing vulnerability. In a world obsessed with self-promotion and public narratives, Clive remained a quiet figure, withdrawn from the prying eyes of the public. Even as his marriage to Amanda faltered, even as the world speculated about their lives, Clive chose silence. But Raven, in her quiet reflection, offered a glimpse into that silence. A silence that wasn't born of apathy, but of deep, unspoken sorrow. Through her eyes, we saw a man shaped by the weight of grief left unexpressed. Clive wasn't indifferent. He wasn't cold or detached. What he carried was the heavy burden of a love lost, an unacknowledged mourning that consumed him quietly, without fanfare. He missed Amanda. He missed the life they had built together on the farm, the shared purpose that had once bound them. He couldn't find the words to voice it, and he couldn't bring himself to break the silence that had settled between them. Instead, Clive threw himself into his role as a father. His bond with Reuben, his right hand on the farm, grew stronger. In the absence of Amanda's presence, Reuben became his anchor, his companion in the solitude that followed. Together, they continued to keep the farm running. But despite the closeness with Reuben, there remained a chasm between Clive and Raven. There was no malice, no resentment, just a quiet distance, a gap no one seemed able to bridge. It wasn't anger, it was simply the space that grief creates, the kind of space that feels both infinite and barren. Clive, in his grief, had retreated inward. He couldn't change the past, couldn't fix what had been broken. And in his silence, there was no blame, just pain too raw to speak, too deep to articulate. Raven saw him for who he was in that moment, not a man avoiding his emotions, but one who had been swallowed by them, trapped in a silence that echoed louder than words. Raven's decision to break her silence didn't come from a desire to hurt, to expose, or to create drama. It came from a place of healing, the need to untangle the years of unspoken grief that had quietly worn her down. Her words weren't meant to confront, they were a release. She wasn't seeking headlines or the attention of the media. What she sought was catharsis, a way to untangle the memories that had clung to her like cobwebs, the guilt that had followed her, and the misunderstandings that had lingered in the silence. By sharing her story, Raven did more than open up about her own pain. It offered clarity to a situation that had been shrouded in confusion for too long. Their marriage had never been one of fiery confrontations, but of slow erosion, quietly fading away in the mist of unmet needs and unspoken regrets. It wasn't a marriage that burned with fury. It was one that slowly withered in fog. Through Raven's revelation, both Clive and Amanda were finally given the clarity they had been denied in their silence. She didn't just heal herself, she helped them find their own understanding, a path toward healing that had always seemed just beyond their reach. In telling the truth, stripped of the polished versions they had shared for so long, Raven brought something more valuable than forgiveness. She brought them the truth. And in the end, that's what they all needed most. Reflection. What truth have you been holding onto, quietly, patiently, waiting for the right time to share? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video with us, and we'll catch you in the next one.